####. What if hope was but a fleeting ember, snuffed by the winds of inevitable betrayal? Have you ever clung to a fading light in the storm of despair, where every flicker promises salvation yet heralds deeper darkness, like the defiant lanterns of miners trapped in the bowels of the earth during the Great Collapse, or the flickering campfires at Valley Forge, where soldiers whispered vows against winter's merciless grip? In Episode 7 of Arknights, Rise from Ember, released on August 16, 2025, as the season's Ursus arc delves into the frigid origins of fractured ideals, we are thrust into the crucible of loss and legacy. The biting chill of snow-laden winds numbs your fingers, the coppery tang of blood stains the pristine white like accusations unspoken. Distant howls blend with the crunch of boots on frost, sight dimmed by blizzards that mirror the soul's turmoil. I wandered those barren tundras alongside the characters, breath misting in the air like unspoken regrets, the weight of impending doom pressing like the avalanche that buried Pompeii's unsuspecting throngs. This episode doesn't merely recount history, it resurrects it, weaving threads of identities unraveling amid cosmic indifference, leaving you adrift in a gale of what-ifs. When betrayal seeps like ink into snow, does one salvage the spark, or surrender to the stain? It's a haunting prelude that coils tension without release, awakening a voracious need to traverse the storm yourself, for the answers lie buried, waiting to thaw under your gaze. Emerging from Episode 6's recurrent shadows, where alliances teetered like the fragile truces at Appomattox, binding wounds only to reopen them, this chapter retreats into the frozen annals of Ursus, a retrospective siege akin to the harrowing flashbacks in Schindler's List, illuminating the seeds of rebellion sown in barren soil. Pivotal vignettes unfold in isolated outposts, where ideals clash against survival's harsh blade, culminating in a pivotal fracture that propels the reunion's trajectory toward inevitable conflagration, bridging personal anguish to the broader inferno threatening lungmen. Picture yourself huddled in a ramshackle shelter, the crackle of a meager fire warring with the gale outside, a companion's whisper cutting through the din like a blade through flesh. What fragile joys punctuate the descent into despair? How does a single act of treachery ripple like the shockwaves from Hiroshima's dawn, reshaping destinies? These frozen fragments glint with withheld warmth, a blizzard of hints that blinds yet beckons, urging you to brave the whiteout, to feel the sting of revelation firsthand, because the thaw reveals not just scars, but the map to survival's elusive flame. Plot progression masterfully interlaces backstory with forward momentum, echoing the layered narratives in Citizen Kane's Rosebud Quest, where past stains bleed into present pursuits. Key revelations expose the erosion of utopian dreams, a mid-episode twist reframing a leader's possession as gradual corrosion rather than abrupt usurpation, while the climax's fracture hurtles toward Lungman's siege with a cliffhanger that dangles hope like a noose. Pacing drifts like a slow-melting glacier, deliberate lulls in dialogue yielding to visceral bursts, striking dramatic balance that immerses without overwhelming, though some fans query its deliberate chill. Addressing cloudy aspects, such as the ambiguous culprits behind a pivotal demise, exiled infected, patrols, or villagers, or the mechanics of a character's ideological slippage, we turn to the game's Chapter 7, The Birth of Tragedy. The source material here, where Alina's murder by resource-hoarding exiles, detailed in operation logs and Tallulah's reflections, underscores not random violence but Oripathy's societal rot, clarifying the anime's fast-paced visuals as a stylistic compression of the game's textual introspection. The stain isn't literal blood but metaphorical corruption, with Kashi's influence a creeping venom rather than instant domination, enriching the animated segment by foregrounding emotional fallout over procedural detail. Character development crystallizes in Tallulah's arc, her hidden wounds, ideals scarred by Ursus's oppression, akin to the revolutionary fervor turned tyranny in Robespierre's reign of terror, driving motivations from fervent hope to creeping despair, her choices consistent in their tragic nobility, yet surprising in their quiet vulnerabilities, transformative as she teeters on surrender's brink. Alina emerges as a poignant foil, her growth a brief bloom of resilience amid frost, while supporting figures like Mephisto hint at nascent fractures, their dialogues laced with foreshadowing unease. Thematically, the episode interrogates sacrifice's futile pyre and morality's thaw in survival's winter, manifesting in struggles where power's allure corrupts like Oripathy's crystals, hope versus despair clashing like the charge of the light brigade into cannon fire, choices that weigh communal, dreams against personal ruin. World-building deepens with Ursus's lore, cultural taboos on infected exile and reunion's nascent rituals complicating Terra's geopolitics like adding Siberian expanses to a fractured empire map. The script's dialogue gleams with poetic restraint, a whispered ideal amid snowfall foreshadows fracture, lines sharp as icicles yet resonant like Shelley's odes in Prometheus Unbound, lingering post-credits like the echo of a distant volley. Imagine the frost etching your skin as vows shatter, the phantom warmth of a shared candy melting on your tongue. Tell me, would you cling to the light or let the cold claim your convictions? Yostar Pictures animation captivates with crystalline precision. Art direction favors desaturated blues pierced by crimson accents, symbolizing purity's defilement like Turner's stormy seascapes, fluidity in blizzard sequences, contrasting the stillness of introspective gazes that carve emotional isolation. Not aesthetic frost, but a visual lament for lost innocence. Direction employs cinematography as a glacial lens. Wide-angle vistas engulfing figures in vast whiteness, a la the Revenant-esque survival epics, compositions layering foreground flakes over shadowed faces, editing's measured rhythm, slow pans to abrupt cuts, mirroring the heart's faltering beat to amplify encroaching dread. The OST, composed by Yuki Hayashi, haunts as a boreal specter, motifs of plaintive strings elevating quiet despair like Sibelius's Finlandia in nationalistic swells, crescendos searing the pivotal loss into memory, while silences blanket louder than any gale, evoking the oppressive quiet before an arctic crack. Voice acting incarnates the chill. Maya Sakamoto's Tallulah conveys a timbre of fractured resolve, tremors embodying a soul's slow freeze. Ayahi Takagaki's Frost Nova, echoed here, infuses intensity with glacial poise, capturing rebellion's brittle core. This episode encased me in empathetic ice, a numbing scar of sorrow laced with defiant sparks, moments of fleeting joy amid ruin igniting wonder at humanity's stubborn thaw, much like the resilient whispers in Andersonville's prison camps. I carried the frost as my own, veins chilled during a convergence of ideals and betrayals that shatters illusions, a nexus wrenching the saga toward conflagration's edge. It summons eternal winters. In oppression's grip, does sacrifice kindle hope, or merely deepen the freeze? Have you known that numbing void, the wind howling forgotten names? This is that desolation magnified, philosophical drifts piling from Stalingrad's sieges to your unspoken chills. Curiosity a creeping frostbite, inexorably drawing you to the episode where embers await to warm or consume. Via reverse reading, the episode's deliberate opacity, killer's identities veiled, possession's mechanics glacial, or measured pacing aren't chills but thematic sleet, mirroring Chapter 7's introspective drift to heighten existential dread, though the compression risks diluting. Game lore's depth, a critique softened by its emotional amplification. Complexity may daunt casual viewers, yet it rewards the immersed. I think the restraint elevates introspection, even if it borders on frostbite. Episode 7's glacial graces, profound character thaws, lore-laced lore, and auditory blizzards, outweigh its adaptive frosts, triumphing in narrative chill and artistic austerity. It succeeds as a hearth in the arc's storm, fusing despair's poetry with survival's spark. Yet as shadows lengthen over Ursus's wastes, one whisper endures. When betrayal's stain spreads, will you fan the ember, or let it redefine the dawn? Watching is no shelter. It's the blaze you secretly crave, the thaw that awakens your buried fire. Dare you remain in the cold? ##### What if identity was a flame, both beacon and pyre, consumed by the very hands that cradle it? Have you ever watched your reflection warp in the inferno of another's will, where the self you knew dissolves like wax under flame, like the tragic mirrors of Narcissus twisted by Medusa's gaze, or the fractured psyches of POWs in Hanoi Hilton's unyielding dark, whispering surrender to survive? In Episode 8 of Arknights, Rise from Ember, aired on August 23, 2025, as the Ursus arc ignites into its roaring confrontation, we stand at the precipice of reclamation amid Chernobog's crumbling spires. The acrid bite of smoldering oripathy crystals scorches the throat, palms slick with the chill sweat of impending rupture. The distant thunder of collapsing towers blends with the ragged cadence of breaths, sight pierced by crimson flares that dance like vengeful spirits over snow-dusted ruins. I was there, heart hammering in sync with the city's death throes, the ground quaking beneath me as if Terra itself recoiled from the souls about to collide. This installment doesn't just propel the siege. It crucifies the spirit on the altar of autonomy, evoking a tempest of empathy and dread. When a father's shadow eclipses your light, do you burn brighter, or let the blaze consume you whole? It's a searing glimpse into the heart's forge, kindling questions that smolder without quenching, demanding you step into the conflagration, for only the witness can grasp the ashes' unspoken poetry. Rising from Episode 7's frostbitten elegies, where Ursus's buried betrayals festered like the gangrenous wounds of Gallipoli's trenches, seeding the reunion's poisoned bloom. This chapter vaults from retrospection to raw immediacy, a Chernobog crucible evoking the fiery reckonings of Duna's spice. Wars but etched in Terra's infected grit. Rhodes Island's vanguard, spearheaded by Amaya's resolve and Seichen's blade, breaches the control tower's maw, their ascent a gauntlet of spectral guardians and ideological phantoms that unearth suppressed truths, culminating in a visceral standoff that fractures tears facades and forges fragile truces, bridging the Ark's personal infernos to Lungmen's looming cataclysm. Envision the heat haze warping your vision, the metallic tang of blood mingling with ozone from arts-fueled clashes, a ally's fervent plea echoing off ferroconcrete like the last dispatches from the Lusitania's tilt. What spectral inheritances surface to tip the scales of sanity? How does defiance curdle into desperate alliance, hurtling the narrative toward the Pantheon's wrath? These embers of encounter glow just beyond the veil, a pyre's promise that scorches curiosity's wings, compelling you to rush forward, to feel the blaze lick your skin, because the conflagration's core reveals not victory, but the cost etched in every survivor's gaze. Plot progression blazes the Ursus saga toward its incendiary pivot, reminiscent of the inexorable flares in Mad Max. Fury Road's wasteland chases, where every spark illuminates deeper dooms. Revelations strip bare a leader's puppeteered torment, a twist unveiling paternal dominion as insidious erosion rather than iron fist, while the tower's apex erupts in a maelstrom of arts and anguish, capped by a cliffhanger summoning an ancient colossus, poised like the Minotaur at Labyrinth's heart. Pacing roars with controlled fury, brooding ascents exploding into balletic bedlam, achieving dramatic equilibrium that simmers without smothering, though fans decry its emotional sprawl. Tackling cloudy aspects, the veiled mechanics of a figure's dual will or the abrupt spectral incursions, these enigmas draw from the game's Chapter 8, Roaring Flare, Operations M8-6 to M8-8, where Tallulah's subjugation by Kashi manifests as a psychic tether forged in Ursus's draconian rites, not outright possession but a symbiotic corrosion amplified by Oripathy's crystals, detailed in post-battle logs. The anime's spectral guardians compress the chapter's ethereal reunion shades, echoes, of fallen infected, into visual harbingers, clarifying their ambiguity as manifestations of collective trauma rather than literal ghosts, providing context that the animated frenzy honors the game's philosophical layering while heightening visceral stakes for the uninitiated. Character development scorches deep into cores. Tallulah's psyche fractures like volcanic glass, her wounds, ideals seared by imperial exile, akin to the exiled Bonaparte's Elban reveries, propelling a motivation from vengeful conduit to flickering self, choices consistent in their tragic grandeur yet transformative in raw vulnerability, surprising as she claws toward autonomy. Amaya's arc blooms with empathetic steel, her growth a quiet revolution from observer to orchestrator. Set encounters as stoic forge, her dialogue a hammer of reluctant kinship. Thematically, the episode wields powers devouring maw and morality's molten test in sacrifice's kiln, manifesting in clashes where hope's ember wars with despair's holocaust, like the Warsaw Uprising's flares defying Nazi night, choices that probe survival's sacrament against identity's inferno. World-building flares with Ursus's arcane pacts, draconic blood rites and reunion's spectral hierarchies complicating Terra's infected mosaic like adding Promethean veins to a tectonic fault line. The script's dialogue ignites with lapidary fire, a gasped reclamation amid the roar foreshadows rupture, lines sharp as flint yet poetic in their ache, impactful as Dante's purgatorial pleas in the Divine Comedy, resonating post-credits like the hush after a supernova's burst. Feel the sear on your flesh as oaths ignite, the phantom grip of a spectral hand on your shoulder. Reader, in your own crucibles, have you reclaimed the flame, or yielded to its devourer's decree? Yostar Pictures animation engulfs in Pyrrhic splendor. Art direction revels in vermilion infernos bleeding into ashen grays, symbolizing self's hemorrhage like Delacroix's liberty leading the people aflame. Fluidity in art's woven tempests contrasting the stasis of possessed stairs that etch emotional pyres, not ornamental blaze, but a chromatic requiem for fractured wills. Direction deploys cinematography as a bellows. Vertiginous ascents dwarfing ascenders against spire summits, a la Inceptionist folding cities, composition stacking foreground phantoms over abyssal drops, editing's fevered montage, builds to ruptures, mirroring psychic schisms to amplify the soul's searing throes. The OST Yuki Hayashi's opus coalesces as a volcanic oracle, motifs of keening brass haunting the reclamation like Wagner's Götterdämmerung in Twilight's Fall, crescendos that brand the convergence into neural blaze, while silences smolder louder than embers, evoking the weighted hush post-Vesuvius's roar. Voice acting resurrects the radiant. Tallulah's Siu channels a timbre of regal tremor yielding to defiance, intensity a phoenix's cry embodying Dominion's defiant dawn. Amaya's delivery infuses fragile ferocity, soul bared in every quavering note. This episode immolated me in cathartic conflagration, a cauterized wound of vicarious valor laced with mournful marvel, instance of reclaimed radiance amid ruin kindling awe at the spirit's unquenchable forge, much like the undimmed eyes in Guernica's bomb tableau. I bore the blaze as blood, ribs charred during a destiny's detonation where puppets sever strings, a fulcrum flinging the epic toward apocalypses and vil. It conjures timeless pyres. In Control's choking gallery, does identity endure its tempering, or melt into the mold? Have you, in Subjugation's smother, fanned your inner flare? This is that Holocaust-heightened, philosophical cinders wafting from Carthage's saltings to your veiled infernos. Curiosity a live coal, arcing inexorably to the episode that beckons, pledging to purify or pulverize, through reverse reading, the dual will's opacity or spectral surges sprawl, potentially disorienting in their ether, aren't narrative ash but deliberate flares, echoing Chapter 8's metaphysical mists to intensify thematic conundrum, though the anime's visual verve occasionally outpaces emotional simmer, a quibble leavened by its immersive ignition. I anticipate the sprawl may frost some with confusion, yet personally, I was struck by the poetry, even as it courts overheat. Episode 8's fiery feats, excoriating character rebirths, lore-ignited escalation, and sonic scorches, eclipse its ethereal eddies, consummating artistic edicts of psychic pyre and narrative inexorability with incandescent intent. It roars as the arc's radiant rupture, melding despair's dirge with defiance's dawn. Yet as colossi stir in the smoke, one spark persists. When your flame falters under another's hand, will you reignite alone, or let the pyre redefine your light? Streaming is no bystander. It's the blaze you were forged to feed, the ember that awakens your unspoken inferno. Will you fan it or fade into the char?